Hallo meine Lieben und willkommen zu einer neuen Folge der Flowgrade Show. Ich bin Max Gotzler und in diesem Podcast geht es rund um persönliche Transformation und vielmehr um die Gestaltung eines Lebens im Flow-Zustand. In eben diesem Zustand, in dem wir völlig präsent sind, total vertieft in das, was wir gerade tun, denn dieser Flow-Zustand hat nachweislich viele positive Effekte auf so ziemlich jeden Lebensbereich. Und genau darum spreche ich darüber so gerne. Ich bin total überzeugt davon, dass wenn wir mehr Flow im Leben haben, es uns grundlegend besser geht. Und dazu schauen wir uns verschiedene Bereiche an, wie zum Beispiel Biohacking, Neurowissenschaften, Flow-Psychologie und Methoden und Strategien aus eben diesen Bereichen, die uns tagtäglich dabei helfen können, unsere Lebenserfahrung zu bereichern. Diese Folge möchte ich wiederum mit einer Frage starten, und zwar, wenn du an jemanden denkst, der gerade meditiert. Welches Bild entsteht dir im Kopf? Ich könnte mir vorstellen, dass du an jemanden denkst, der im Schneidersitz mit geschlossenen Augen da sitzt, vielleicht mit einer Mudra, Handhaltung und meditiert. Aber muss das wirklich sein? Müssen wir uns immer hinsetzen, die Augen schließen oder hinlegen, um dann zu meditieren? Oder geht es auch anders? Genau diese klassische Vorstellung einer Meditation möchte ich in der heutigen Folge herausfordern. Und dazu habe ich wieder eine tolle Gesprächspartnerin, und zwar die liebe Nita Sweeney aus Columbus, Ohio, aus den USA. Denn diese hat ein Buch geschrieben, das es in Kürze auch in deutscher Version geben wird, und zwar Make Every Move a Meditation. Und wie der Name schon sagt, geht es in dem Buch über Meditation, aber eben auch Bewegung. Also können wir meditieren, auch wenn wir Sport machen, wenn wir spazieren gehen oder wenn wir einen Waldlauf machen. Genau das werden wir heute diskutieren. Ein paar Worte zu meiner heutigen Gesprächspartnerin. Die Nita hat nämlich einen sehr beeindruckenden Lebenslauf hinter sich. Sie war 10 Jahre lang Anwältin, bis sie in einer schweren Depression gelandet ist und sich dann komplett neu erfunden hat. Durch einen Impuls einer Freundin hat sie angefangen zu laufen und zu schreiben. Sie hat Schreibkurse belegt und letztendlich sich im Alter von bereits 49 Jahren komplett neu erfunden. Heute ist sie mehr oder weniger Marathonläuferin und Schriftstellerin. Sie hat ein Buch geschrieben, das tatsächlich Awards gewonnen hat, das zum Bestseller wurde in den USA, und zwar Depression Hates a Moving Target. Und ihr neues Buch, Make Every Move a Meditation, das wird es in Kürze in Deutsch geben. Und zwar ab dem 24. Mai im deutschen Buchhandel verfügbar. Meine Empfehlung, schenke es gerne weiter, hole es dir, lese es. Ich konnte bereits reinschnuppern und ich bin total überzeugt von dem Konzept. Ich finde es sehr spannend, das heute in der Show zu haben. Also wir sprechen über Meditation, über Bewegung, aber auch über den Lebenslauf von Nita, wie sie es geschafft hat, sich neu zu erfinden, wie das Laufen ein Ventil für sie war, um mit ihren Problemen umzugehen. Und es fließen tatsächlich gegen Ende des Interviews auch ein paar Tränen. Deswegen meine Empfehlung, bleib gerne bis zum Ende dran. Hier noch der kurze Hinweis. Da meine Gesprächspartnerin Amerikanerin ist, ist diese Folge in englischer Sprache. Wenn du dem Englischen also nicht so mächtig bist, dann kannst du auch gerne mitlesen, und zwar in den Shownotes auf flowgrade.de oder auch mit dem Transkript. Das gibt es im Flow Tribe, unserer internen Community. Und hier noch der Appell, melde dich gerne an. Wir haben ein kostenfreies Basiskonto. Du kannst gerne mal reinschnuppern in unseren Heimathafen der Flowgrade und Biohacking Community im deutschsprachigen Raum, dem Flow Tribe. Und zwar ganz einfach auf flowtribe.community. Ich wiederhole, flowtribe.community. Dort findest du weitere Infos, kannst dich einfach anmelden, kannst Teil der Community werden. Dort werden wir in Zukunft auch Events ankündigen. Es wird Live-Sessions geben, diverse andere Inhalte, alles, was uns dabei helfen kann, unser Leben und auch unser Business mit mehr Flow zu füllen. So, jetzt aber ohne viele weitere Worte, ganz viel Spaß mit dieser Folge rund um Meditation, Bewegung mit der fantastischen Nita Sweeney. Go for Flow.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup. It becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Be water, my friend.
Dear Nita, welcome on the Flowgrade Show. I'm really happy to have you.
I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So you are one of my few English-speaking guests. I do have English-speaking guests every once in a while, and especially when they come out with something in German language, and our listeners are capable of speaking English. So that's why this episode is in English for everyone here, because Nita is based in Columbus, Ohio, the country the USA, where I spent 4 years, as many of you know, playing basketball. So we had a great already conversation here before the recording. And already before we dive into some questions here, Nita is coming out with a book in German language. It's called Make Every Move a Meditation, and it's coming out on the 25th of May in Germany. And so if you enjoy this conversation, if you like this topic, meditating while moving, then I recommend you check out the book. It's in every bookstore available. You can look for it online. You can look for it physically, ask for it, but check it out. I already got a sneak peek. I had a digital copy that I could prepare with for, and it's a really cool read, a really interesting read, and especially because your story is so interesting. And I want to start, Nita, with asking you, how are you feeling right now?
Well, I'm pretty good. It's always exciting to have a new book coming out. I didn't get published until I was a little bit older, and now it just feels just, joyful and youthful and wonderful to have that. So right now I feel really, really good.
Because I'm aware, and I'm asking you that for a reason, I'm aware that you weren't always feeling so great. And I came about that story, and it caught my eye because you describe it very, like with a lot of images. You're sitting there with your pajamas, you're depressed, you're not feeling great, you're not moving. And then all of a sudden you come across a post from a friend. But without me taking away anything from that story, can you tell me that story again?
Yes. So I was on the sofa, the couch, if you will, and there may have been bonbons, I'm not sure, but I definitely was not eating healthy. Let's just say that. I was in a very, very depressed place after a whole bunch of losses. So we had 7 people I cared about, and a cat that all died in an 11-month period of time. And this time on the sofa was probably maybe a year or so after that. And those people included my 24-year-old niece who died of cancer, Jamie, and our mother, and a whole bunch of other people that we adored. And I was just in a place where I didn't know what to do with any of it. I had therapy, I had medication, I'm married to a wonderful man. I was doing my best to write. I was in school for writing. I was doing kind of all the right things, and I wasn't really sure I wanted to go on. That's how bad it was. So I definitely was not my perky self that I am today. And I was scrolling through social media, and a high school friend, and that's important because I knew her. She was someone I identified with. We were the same age, about the same size, equally unathletic. And she posted, "Call me crazy, but this running is getting to be fun." And I thought, do we need to do a wellness check on her? Running, fun? Those words did not go together for me at all. But, she continued, and I kept watching her. I just followed her posts and cheered her on. And she was doing an interval training plan where you do a little bit of jogging, a little bit of running. And eventually I got brave enough to open that plan, not right away. And it said, and again, these words are important, 60 seconds of jogging. Because at that point in my life, I was having trouble even walking the dog around the block. And I swear, if it had said, I don't know, a minute of jogging, or especially if it had said running, I would have just, closed the laptop and walked away or gone back to bed probably. But I watched her and I kept looking at the plan. And eventually, as here in Central Ohio, we have hard winters and we have lovely springs because after that hard winter, the little, flowers come up and the trees start to bloom. And as winter turned to spring, I got a little more energy and I decided I'd try it. So I leashed up my dog, Morgan, as a decoy because I was hoping no one would think, oh my gosh, this old, overweight, depressed woman in probably pink sweatpants. I'm not even sure. Definitely Velcro sneakers. I mean, I just didn't have anything. Is going to try to run. I mean, I really thought people were watching, which of course they were not, but that's a whole nother issue of paranoia. And so I picked up a digital timer, so one of those little kitchen timers, because it said 60 seconds, and took the dog down into this hidden ravine and stood there long enough that the dog peed on a bush and then looked at me as if he was wondering, why are we down here? You're just standing here with this timer. And eventually hit the button and I started jogging. And it wasn't immediately miraculous, but that chain of events led to something that has been nearly miraculous for me. And that was running with my dog. And that, now the new book tells that story, but it also talks about the fact that I'd been a meditator for a long time. I had that tool, but there was something about adding the movement to it that really changed things in a very positive way. And I'm so grateful. I've told my high school friend many, many times how, I didn't tell her at the time, but later how grateful I am, because it's possible that she saved my life without knowing it. So that's another thing I always say is you never know who's watching. You do not know who you are inspiring by any little action. And she really just by her continual effort, posting, workout 1, workout 2, workout 3, led me to take the dog into that ravine and begin a transformation that I couldn't have imagined, actually. I'm talking to a man in Germany right now. That's her. That's her doing that. That simple social media post is led to this conversation. That's the way it feels to me.
Oh, you should definitely reach out to her and let her take part in that story.
Oh, absolutely. We've had many conversations, and she's kind of shy and, just a very unassuming person. And it's lovely. That's part of what's so lovely about it.
Yeah, and the rest is history. I mean, it didn't only start with 60 seconds, but it went on. And now, as far as I know, you've ran several ultra marathons and several half marathons. I'm afraid I won't get the number right because there are quite many of them, but you've really succeeded in becoming a persistent runner.
Yes, persistent. That's a good word for me. Maybe tenacious. Yes. So right now, as of when we're recording this, it's 3 ultra marathons, 3 marathons, which is 26.2 miles. And I'm trying to think the halves. I'm trying to run a half in each of the 50 states of the United States. So I'm at I think 23 states and 36 halves or something like that. And I keep hoping to check a bunch more off the list, and we'll see. We'll see. I like having goals, something to pull me toward, and having a race in the future is really helpful to structure a training plan around. And just kind of keeps me motivated.
And Nita, I'm also really interested in the process again. That's why I'm gonna dig in a bit more, because I imagine you sitting there and you have that social media post and you're inspired to run. But when did it become obvious to you that this running could be a solution? Because not only did you write the new book on that, but another one, your first, I guess not the first one, but the first one that was published maybe, and an award-winning book. And I'm just going to read the title so I get it right, but it's called Depression Hates a Moving Target, How Running with My Dog Brought Me Back from the Brink. And can you let me into this process again? Like, how did you all of a sudden come across that running is such a powerful tool to overcome these very serious conditions? This sickness, which is not only a psychological one, but a biological one.
Right. Well, as with many things, knowledge comes in hindsight. It comes after. And people around me started seeing the changes before I did. So I had people because I was kind of a secret runner, not kind of. I was a secret runner for a little while, about a month or maybe 6 weeks. I didn't tell anybody I'd started this jogging thing. And I didn't even tell my husband for a couple of weeks because I'd had, so many attempts at different things and just wasn't able to finish things. I was really good at starting things and really bad at finishing them. So I was afraid of what people would think. And so people would ask me, are you losing weight? And I actually wasn't at that time. I eventually did. Did you get new glasses? Did you get your hair cut? They would notice something was different, but they couldn't put their finger on it. And, I'd say no, no, no. But what happened was I had been in a place where I'd had to nap almost every day. I'd had to lie down. Usually in the afternoon, I just would have no energy left, either physically or emotionally. And a couple times I just in the habit of lying down would lie down and realize I wasn't tired. And then I would get back up. And sometimes I'd even go back out, go back outside with the dog. And then I started being able to finish some of the writing projects, some shorter writing projects that I'd had trouble working on. At the time, I was the publisher of a monthly writing newsletter, and I had so much difficulty writing the essays for the monthly email and blogging about it. And that became not easy, still not easy, but doable. Whereas before it was such a struggle. I mean, just a horrible struggle. And so I started noticing that other areas of my life were getting better. And then plus, the act of doing something you say you will, I printed out the training plan and taped it to the end of my bookcase. And after I would come in from a workout, I would make a little check mark, hello, dopamine hit. And, so I noticed I'm actually completing things that I said I will. So it was actually very gradual, but it didn't take that long. So and other people noticed it first. And then, I'm not sure, I don't think I've actually written about this, but later on, the huge change was that I began having side effects of some of the medication that I was on. And I'd never had the side effects of before. And they were the side effects you get when you're on too much medication. And so I had conversations with my psychiatrist about this, about what is going on. And she said, I don't know. I think it's the running. And so we, tapered me off some things and reduced some things. And now I'm on a very small dose. And so that did something also, because a lot of the side effects that I was just used to living with made it difficult to focus, made it difficult to complete work. And so it was sort of this very positive snowball effect where, the physical benefit, the actual physical benefit of movement helped me focus and become more clear and feel a little bit brighter. My mood was a little brighter. I would notice colors that had been there that maybe I hadn't seen for years, because depression, it's almost like it puts a gray filter over the world. Mood disorders, especially depression. And it was like somebody turned the lights back on in a very gradual way. But you notice them all of a sudden. And then, eventually I was able to complete some longer projects that I hadn't been. And that was, get some shorter things published. And so yeah, it was a very looking backward kind of thing. In fact, the first book, I thought, the book Depression Hates a Moving Target, I thought it was really just going to be a middle-aged woman runs, marathon, long races kind of book. That's what I thought the story was about. And the more I developed it and worked with, you work with a developmental editor, many authors do. They said that's not the story. The story is you coming back to life, you wanting to live, coming from somebody who was on that sofa and not really sure whether any of it was worth it to, someone who really wants to thrive. And that's the story of that book. And then the Make Every Move meditation came from having been a meditator all these years and realizing very quickly, almost within the first couple of weeks, that I could meditate, that I was meditating actually while I was doing these workouts, just by choosing to focus on maybe the visual field, or it was spring. So we have a lot of wonderful songbirds here in Central Ohio. And so, hearing the songs as I did the workouts, that became my object of meditation. But, the meditation background had already taught me that I could choose a focus and use that as a place to ground myself during the workout. And that just sort of magnified the effect.
So now we have the running story, exactly, because the book is about running and meditating, or moving and meditating. And that's why we need the meditation story as well. But before I dig in, something that interests me, because sort of like on a tangent a little bit, because you describe yourself as someone who's really good at starting things, but wasn't in the past necessarily someone who finished things. Interestingly, to me, you seem like quite the opposite, because when I dug into your background, it seems like you had quite a few career changes and you really forced yourself through. You wrote books, you wrote to several publishers, you got rejected several times, which you hear a lot oftentimes from successful authors later on, that in the beginning they get rejected and then they really find out what their passion is. But you were a lawyer, as far as I understand. And
yes,
now
I practiced law for 10 years, long time ago.
And maybe not to spend too much time on that, but can you quickly, because that's a personal interest of mine, how did that change come about from being a lawyer to being a full-time writer and meditator?
So that's a good story. We'll see if you guys think it's a good story. I think it's a good story. So I went to college to become a writer, a journalist. I wanted to become a creative writer, but my family is very practical. And nobody knew anybody who could make a living as a writer. Nobody. But a journalist, maybe, still a writer, but magazines, newspapers, things like that. And when I was in journalism school, it just didn't click at all. But a friend of mine was going to law school, and I was very interested in politics. I actually preferred, not that politics and law are two different things, but they are actually a little different. And she was going to law school and she was a journalism major. And so I thought, well, chances are I can make a living if I'm a lawyer. And it sounds so silly now, but I got really good grades. I could write. I got excellent scores on the what they call the LSAT. So the LSAT, the test you have to take to enter law school. At that time, at least. I don't even know now if they do that. And it's been a long time. Yeah, I don't know. But I'm sure there's some hoops you have to jump through. And if nothing, I am good at hoop jumping. And so I wound up in law school. And from the very first day, I thought, I am not sure this was a good idea. But I'm persistent, as you said. And I just kept at it. And I didn't do great in law school, but I passed the bar exam and I got a job in a field that interested me. And I practiced for about 10 years. But the problem the whole time, and the problem I kept trying to deny, was that I hate conflict. I do not enjoy conflict at all. And to the point that it's almost a traumatic thing. I mean, not healthy. There are people that you just don't like it, but I have a visceral reaction to it. And somehow I was able to basically ignore that for a decade. But what I did was I kept being able to structure my work so that I could write. So I did a ton of research and a ton of legal writing, and I really enjoyed that. And I was really good at it. I mean, I will say I made partner and I got a lot of accolades. I was able to do public speaking and things that I really enjoy. But at some point, it just took too much of a toll, that kind of feeling like I was always faking it, took too much of a toll. And it was the early 90s, and I don't know if, the medications weren't there. Therapy was still kind of a thing that you only did if you were weak. And this, again, is probably not even what everybody believed, but that was the message that I had gotten somewhere, that you just had to, the old pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And so I did not go to therapy. I did not get on medication, despite I had all the classic signs of being depressed. And so what happened was I came very, very close to committing suicide. And I wound up in the psych ward, in a mental hospital, where they saved my life, essentially, by keeping me safe until they could get me on some medications that would stabilize my mood. But by that time, it's almost like I was this machine, and some spring popped out of it and all the pieces fell apart. The spring that held everything together popped out and all the pieces fell apart. And we could never get that spring back into the right place again for me to be a lawyer. And it took me a long, long time to accept that that wasn't going to happen. And I tried a few other things, and I just couldn't hold a regular job. I just couldn't do it. And because I had a, really good, benefit package, if you will, I was able to be taken care of, because I would have been financially in a really awful place if I hadn't been a lawyer. Quite frankly, it's a privilege issue, and I'm grateful and also realistic about the fact that that would not have worked for everybody. And so I started writing the way I wanted to. I did some magazine articles, I did some poetry, and then I started taking a bunch of courses. And I did that for a number of years, where I just took courses. I didn't really even try to publish anything.
What kind of courses?
And I took primarily courses with a writer named Natalie Goldberg, and she is a meditation.
I saw that you follow her, your practice. I think it was written in your bio.
Right, online. Right. And she actually wrote the foreword to A Daily Dose of Now, the most recent book. And she's written, I think she's done, I know she's done blurbs for, I think, Depression, Anxiety, Target, and Make Every Move Meditation. But I became her assistant. And so I did that for another almost decade, where I would be in Taos, New Mexico. We lived there for a few years and then moved back to Ohio. It just wasn't a good fit for me. Taos wasn't. But the workshops were, and spending time with Natalie. And it's a very meditation-based way to write, where you write in a very intuitive fashion. And there's a lot of principles that go along with meditation that you use in the writing. And that was a great fit for me. Doesn't work for everybody, but it was a great fit for me. And so I spent years doing that. And then I wanted, I'll just be honest, I like credentials. I like pieces of paper that you can, that are suitable for framing, certificates. And so I really wanted, but also I wanted to go to graduate school to study writing at the higher level, kind of not to make up for the creative writing I didn't study in college, but to just have that depth of study with professional writers. And so I went to Goddard College and received my MFA. And then after that, I continued, and all this time I continued writing book-length projects, but I didn't couldn't finish them, because this is before I started running. So I either couldn't finish them, or I would abandon them because I just didn't think they were good enough, lots of reasons. And then finally at Goddard, it was actually a couple years before I started Goddard, I started writing, after my father died, I started writing about the last year he was alive. And all he wanted to do was play golf. And it coincided with me having just been in the hospital and no longer practicing law. And so I had nothing but time, and he had limited time. And so we spent that last year together. And then eventually he and my mom moved in with my husband and I here in Ohio, and until he died. And so that's actually a book that I'm working on right now that I hope to get published someday, but that's not, But that's sort of the trajectory. It's like I had this huge crash and burn, and then I just had to go inside for a long time. And by a long time, I mean a decade, where I just had to completely work on healing myself. And then I was starting to get, kind of my feet under me with some of the writing. And then I discovered running. And it was just like this, I don't know if you believe in coincidences, but it was just this sort of timing thing where the world was waking up to mental health issues. This publisher, Mango, was very interested in bringing a mental health message into the world and taking risks on small bets like me. And I had just discovered another tool that was a bit like rocket fuel for my mental health. And it all just kind of came together. And then, then the next thing to do after I'd written about that story was to talk about how the meditation was foundational really for all of it, and how I do that all the time, and how anybody can do that all the time.
It's really inspiring. I really have to say you're also an inspiration, especially for people. I'm 39 right now. I assume maybe in a couple of years it might get me as well. But I have a lot of people that I work with also. I coach people also. And when they are in their later stages in life, oftentimes it's hard for people to reinvent themselves, because they think, okay, I've been doing that for so many years and this is my comfort zone. But as far as I understand, I think you were around 49 when you all of a sudden made this switch and were in a bad place. And all of a sudden you started running. And long story short, but now you published several books, you're running, you're meditating, you're healthy. So thank you for being such an inspiration. And maybe just to give you a little background, because I get a lot of messages with recommendations for books and things I might be interested in from publishers. And something sometimes catches my eye, and then I look a little further and I saw that your story and the message just fits. Like there's something about it that is authentic, that it's real. And then I'm interested, and that's how that came to be. And so, yeah, I just wanted to congratulate you on that path, and also to thank you for being such an inspiration.
Well, Max, thank you so much for saying that. Writing is sometimes like shouting into the void, and you just wonder, is anybody out there? And so when I am asked to be on a show like this, or when somebody publishes a book, or somebody writes a review, or somebody buys your book, anything like that, it's just so helpful because it does get lonely sometimes, and it gets you wonder, is this really important? And so what I have to do with that, though, to be honest, is I have to keep going back to the fact that this is the only story I've got. And this is what has really worked for me. I'm very, very careful to tell people, this may not work for you. And please don't go off your meds and think you can just start running and everything will be hunky-dory, or you'll just start meditating, everything will be hunky-dory. That is not my story. But I hear from people so often that, especially with Depression Hates a Moving Target, is sort of an identification story. It's about, yes, this is where I have been. And this is how, I can see somebody who has gotten through that. And then Make Every Move a Meditation is much more of a how-to. This is the step-by-step process whereby I do these things. And it all... Again, it's just the story I've got. And I hear that. I love the word authentic because that really resonates with me, because people can tell if you're not telling them the truth. They can smell that a mile away. And so I know I can. And so I just try to be as honest as I can. And, I've been through, even though I have all these tools and I've had these accomplishments, I still have days where it's tough. I do. And I'm really honest about that. But now I know that I just need to stick around and keep doing what I know how to do, and that it'll get different. It may not always feel better, but it'll be different. And yeah. And so thank you, I guess, just for saying that out loud. Some days I really need to hear that, and that's I hope other people have people in their lives that can say that to them, to say, I'm so glad you're here. Because that's what I heard, Max. I heard you say, I'm so glad you're here. And
yeah.
That means so much to me. Oh my gosh.
What I mean.
Yeah.
No, and also I think that people say that way too less. That's why for me it's also important when I have that feeling or that urge, I want to say it out loud, because why not? So yeah, and I really know I'm inspired by your work. So let's actually talk a little bit about the new book, because that's coming out in German, Make Every Move a Meditation, and something that might irritate people, because I think everyone has an image of meditation. I actually looked, when you Google meditation, you find these people always in these mantra poses and sitting and with their eyes closed. So my question for you, Nita, the first one around meditation, is what do most people get wrong when they think about meditation? Because there's a certain concept that is being sold here.
Yes. Oh, I love myth busting. Let's bust some myths. So the first thing they'd say is, I tried to meditate and I just can't stop my thoughts. And I want to say, well, good. That means you're not dead. Because your mind's job is to think thoughts. That's its job. And what we do in meditation is we create an environment that invites the mind to calm down. But you can't force it. In fact, if you start fighting with it, it actually will make it worse. When you try to, most people. Now, people with really intense focus sometimes can stop their thoughts. But not for very long. And it's not relaxing. It's very, actually painful. So that's probably the first one is, oh, my mind is too busy. My mind is too busy. And it's almost like a badge of honor or something. Oh, I have such a busy mind. Well, yeah, I know. Everybody's got a busy mind. Especially when you first start. So that's probably the biggest one. The other one is I can't sit still, to which I want to say, well, then don't. Meditate while you're walking, meditate while you're running. Excuse me. I will say, though, you have to develop a level of focus that sometimes is easier to do while you're sitting still, while your eyes are closed. But you don't have to do that. And you don't have to start with that. You can start with, especially slow walking or just noticing things in your daily life. So those are probably the two big ones. And then the third one I used to get, which I don't get as much anymore because I have taught writing classes here in Central Ohio for many, many years. And we do a little bit of meditation in the classes because I use the Natalie Goldberg method. And people would be concerned, not everybody, but that somehow by meditating, it was going to turn them into a Buddhist or turn them into something they didn't want to be. They'd be a yogi or they'd be something they were. And I think it was probably people who have possibly strong religious beliefs. And so I wanted to be really clear in the class that I know Catholic priests who meditate. I know, very religious people who meditate and atheists who meditate and everything in between. But it's sort of like tofu. It takes on whatever flavor, you're immersed in. And so what you learn in meditation is not how to become anything but yourself, because it's a deep examination into your own thoughts and your own body sensations. And what better way to get to know what you really believe and what you really understand about the world than doing a practice that points your attention directly at that. So those are the three big ones.
I just thought about your story that you introduced the book with, actually, where it is when you're running and then you tell your friend that today you're focusing on your left ankle. I think that's how it starts. And then actually that story made you also think about the book idea, because the reaction of your friend was so, okay, does that work? Is that really something you could do? But can you lead me through the process? Because I think for people, it's probably still hard to imagine, how does that work? I'm moving, I get all the sensory input because obviously I have my eyes open, I'm running through the world, but I'm still in a meditative, or I try to get in a meditative state. So how does it go from focusing into that meditative state while running?
So when you say meditative state, that's another thing I would say, maybe not a myth, because there are levels of meditative states. You can, levels of concentration, levels of awareness, and you can become more and more focused, more and more aware. But to begin with, it's simply about being exactly where you are. And so there's no place to go to. You're not escaping or you're not leaving. You're being where you are. So I know that was another, I guess we could call that a myth. I was on a running program and someone said, oh my gosh, if I tried to meditate while I ran, I would just, run into a tree or something. And I thought, well, not if you're really meditating, you'll see the tree. But so let me back up. So the steps, the first step is simply the intention. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to do that. And then choosing what I call an interval, which could be a time period, or if you're moving, a distance. So let's use running, because that's what that's what I wrote about. I do mention other sports in the book also, but mainly it's about running because that's what I do. So let's say I'm going to run a mile and I've chosen to meditate during this run. I might choose a distance from, I run in a neighborhood, so there's driveways. I might choose a distance of the next 6 driveways. I'm going to meditate during the distance of the next 6 driveways from where I'm at. Then I choose an object of meditation, which is the thing on which you focus or the place you point your mind. And we'll use what I call my wonky ankle, which it's a congenital harmless congenital defect in my ankle that sometimes there are sensations as a result of it. They're not necessarily pleasant or unpleasant. It's just there, like a tingling kind of thing. So I'll say for the next 6 driveways, I'm going to focus on or notice or be aware of the sensations in my ankle, if there are any, or the absence of sensation in my ankle while I'm moving, while I'm running. And then I start moving and I point my mind toward that ankle. I don't look at it. I don't think about it. I don't imagine it. I put my awareness into the present moment, the actual real-time sensations in my ankle. If there aren't any, then I notice the fact that there aren't any. And if there are any, then I get curious. Are they hot, cold, flat, stabbing? What do they feel like? Get curious about it. And I do this with an attitude which there's not I'm not sure that I'd be interested to hear the German word, but we call it equanimity. And it's a calmness of mind, a calmness or evenness of mind with curiosity also, and a kind of a befriending almost. So you're neither leaning toward it nor leaning against it. You're not grabbing toward it. You're not pushing it away. Even if it's unpleasant, you're not pushing it away. Even if it's pleasant, you're not trying to get more of it. You're just trying to be with it exactly as it is. And you just do that until your mind wanders, which it will, because you're alive. And you'll be thinking about your grocery list or whatever, or what you're going to have for breakfast when you get home. And when the mind wanders, I gently bring my mind back to that ankle, to that sensation, that place in my body and what it feels like. And I do that over and over. And always trying to just kind of have that openness toward it and just see what's actually there. And that's the practice. It's actually that simple. And you can do it with any body sensations are probably the easiest. So especially when you're running, you might do it with your breath, or you might notice your footfalls, the feeling of your feet in your shoes. If there's something uncomfortable, it'll draw your attention. And so it's okay to start out with one thing and then realize I can't focus on that because there's this, ache in my toe that is not going to let me go. And so you make the ache in your toe and you find out, well, what is ache in my toe really? What is it? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it sharp? Is it flat? Is it tight? Is it, and then you sometimes will see movement where it'll start out feeling really solid. And then as you continue to notice, it'll move and change, because when we focus on things, it brings a different kind of energy to it. And so they'll change. And you just keep doing that for whatever interval you have selected. And that's the practice. It's actually really simple once you get the basic steps. And those are the same exact steps you would use if you were doing sitting meditation, cross-legged, eyes closed in a ashram or whatever. Well, maybe not an ashram because that might be a different type of meditation, but in a Buddhist setting, mindfulness practice retreat, same thing, same steps. Difference is you're just moving. It's the posture that's different. The posture.
Let me ask you. Yeah, I assume that you're doing also every now and then the sitting down meditation. Like, what is for you the difference? Having done a meditation, not moving and moving, like just in terms of not necessarily one is better than the other, but more that, or what does it do for you when you go on a run and you meditate at the same time?
So the difference is that it's it's like I always want to say it's on steroids, but that's not necessarily not injecting steroids. You get benefit of both. And they're the same, they're very similar benefits. So the movement itself has physical, emotional, and cognitive benefits. And meditation has very similar physical, emotional, and cognitive benefits. And so you get them both. And it's not just like 2 + 2. It's almost, that's probably not a good one, but it's not just like 3 + 3. It's more like 3 × 3. or, 3 to some huge factor, actually. And so you get that extra benefit. And the thing about meditation, you have very physical, emotional, cognitive benefits, but you also learn things about the nature of reality, who you are, what's actually going on in life in meditation, which you can also learn through movement. But it's like it expedites the process because you're doing them both at the same time. So you get the benefits faster. I believe you get more benefits, and they help each other. I know that there have been times, actually the ultra marathons, that's probably the longest distance I have done is 50K, which in US is about 31 miles. We say 31 and change. So it's 31 point something miles. But 50K. And that's a long distance, and I'm slow. So I'm out there a long time. And the race I usually do is in June in Ohio, and it's very hot. And I'm not sure if I wasn't a meditator that I would, first off, I'd even want to do it, but I would be able to finish because it's very, very challenging, especially as I age. And having that extra tool in addition to the physical training, because I do a lot, you train for these races. You have the whole training plan we talked about, and you do your nutrition and your hydration, all the physical things that you can do. And the training itself is mental training by doing long miles on no matter the weather. Within reason. That's all mental training. But having that extra place to go inside when things get so tough and you no longer can turn away, you can only turn those earbuds up so loud. And after a while, the music does not work anymore. I don't actually run with music, but there just comes a point when you can't turn away from the challenge. It's just right there in your face. And so the meditation just bumps up the ability to endure. And this all sounds really, really grueling, but the interesting thing is it can become very blissful because because the pain is transforming. That's what I talked about, that movement, how sometimes you're focusing on something that, especially if something that seems unpleasant, and you'll notice these subtle shiftings, and this thing that felt like a solid rock is no longer a rock. It's this moving thing, and it gets interesting. You become curious about it, and it gets interesting, and so that becomes your object of meditation while you're running. So I know that it's not the kind of thing that will work for everybody, but neither is running. I mean, nothing is for everybody.
Let me ask you something,
yeah.
Nita, because I just think about, I used to play basketball, I told you, and now I'm having that question in my head. Would it work also like playing basketball, but not just for fun, but really like in a competitive game?
You were already doing it, Max. If you're playing at that level, you're already doing it, because at some point, doesn't everything disappear?
It's true.
And
that's actually what I call flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's a little bit different than flow, and I'm not a pro on flow, so I'm hesitant to talk about that. It's because flow. I'll just leave it at that. I started to write about it in the book, and I was very hesitant to, because it is a little bit different, and I'm not a pro on flow, but there's a lot of overlap. So there's a lot of overlap between flow and meditation. But during flow,
give it a try. I'm not going to hold you accountable if you get it wrong, but I'm really interested in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I read some things about this recently, and then I was going to make some notes and really, really trying to challenge myself to understand it because again, I'm not a pro on flow. That's not it's wonderful, and I definitely experience it, and most of us do. But you don't necessarily end up realizing that there is no self when you're in flow. Whereas sometimes when you're meditating, you'll realize that And by no self, I mean there's no fixed self. There's only motion. We're more wave than particle. And in flow, it's more about time collapsing, or how you blink and an hour will go by. Whereas in meditation, if you blink and an hour goes by, you probably haven't been meditating. In meditation, you are there for the entire hour, fully present, and it doesn't bother you to be there. So that's probably the biggest way I can say it. And I don't, I don't know the mechanisms of it.
Let me add to that, because like having focused a lot on flow, in flow you have this struggle. You need this adrenaline and this dopamine at first in order to really intensify the focus. So this dissolution of self can happen. And I also found, when I was researching the literature on the differences between these two states. So I remember one researcher described both of them as ecstatic states. So the meditative states, the psychedelic states, and the flow states. I mean, this was just from that researcher. He said he would collect them under ecstatic states. I'm not sure how he defines ecstatic, but let's leave it for now.
Right. That would be my question. I'd call it more concentration than ecstatic, but go ahead. Yes, that's good.
And exactly.
Definition.
And then he would say that flow is this like intense focus that involves some sort of, you need this challenge. You need this, in flow psychology, they call it the challenge skills ratio. So your skill level needs to meet some sort of challenge. If it's too easy, you won't get into a flow state. If it's too hard, you won't get into a flow state. Right. So you need that sweet spot, and then you get into that tunnel. And that's why they observed it very heavily in athletes, and especially extreme athletes and high performance athletes, because they train a lot, and then they always meet again this next challenge, be it the adversary or the higher bar to jump over, etc. So they challenge themselves, and they find that sweet spot. Or the weightlifter who goes a little bit more than he succeeded in the past. Whereas I think that the meditative state, and I think that goes along with what he said, is more like of a soft focus. Like you try to actually be like, not overcome a challenge per se, but it's kind of by practicing to always come back and apply this mild and soft focus, and you get into this state, which is then differently in the outcome. But as you said, there's a lot of overlap. So you have slower brain waves, you have a release of certain biochemistry, and you're present, you're focused. But whereas in the flow state, you pretty much forget yourself in the activity. In meditation, you become more yourself, if that makes any sense.
Yes, and you don't forget yourself, but you become the activity. So you realize that you are the activity. And so that's where there's that. It's the languages you can't capture what is going on in either of these things with language. There, you have to experience them. I mean, they've done a good job trying for 2,000 years with Buddhism and, hundreds of years with flow, whatever. I don't know when it first started, but yeah. So with meditation, I would say the only challenge that you need is your own mind. And so you would notice a grasping after a challenge. And that doesn't mean you're not going to try the challenge, but you notice the challenge or any grasping after needing that adrenaline, and notice the suffering that creates. And you just continue to notice that. Even if you're going to go ahead and do the challenge. That's, it doesn't stop you from doing the challenge. It just is about noticing, oh yes, this is a discomfort. Okay. That's what's happening here. This is it. I'm grasping after this. I want this. And when I don't get it, I'm uncomfortable. And, continuing that process. And so about the softness, the focus in meditation can be very intense. It can be what we call one-pointed, which is just a dot that you can't even, see hardly. And so small. If you've ever held a treat up in front of a dog, that is one-pointedness. That the way they are, there is nothing else exists except that treat. And so can be a very intense level of focus, while also having the equanimity, which is the softness that you might be talking about, but having them at the same time and holding all of that at the same time, this very intense focus with the most open heart, that you can possibly have, and no gripping, no grasping, no striving. That to me would be possibly the difference, is not needing to constantly up the stakes.
I think that's it. And what I noticed personally, because I actually do meditate 10 minutes every day, and you inspired me now to try it while moving, because I'm usually doing it first thing after I wake up. I sit down, close my eyes, and I remain still for 10 minutes and meditate. And then I usually go for a walk. But what I noticed in regarding the flow state is when I really maintain that meditation practice, I also get into flow more later on when I do then some sort of challenging work, because I'm more aware. And that's the biggest benefit that I noticed, that meditation improves my ability to just be aware and also make my decision making more pointed. And then I'm better able to focus on the right things, to blend out all the distractions, which we have plenty of nowadays. And that again then helps with flow state, which I definitely, from, like you said, like works can not describe it very well, but these are very different states. And that's like my personal experience with meditation. Getting that question back to you, like what have you noticed what is for you like the biggest benefit that regular meditative practice gives you?
I would say my relationships with people, because there's a pause between when I think and when I speak. And it also, it helps with accomplishing things with there's so much of it that's so similar to running, actually. But being able to do what I say I will do, having the stamina to finish long projects, because sitting, even though you're sitting, meditation does require stamina. And then for me, the running, of course, added with the physical stamina. But yeah, the relationships. And also, I probably should have said mental health first, because that actually comes before the relationships. But I still have days where it's really, really can be really dark. But I can meditate. I can turn my attention to what actually is going on in my body. What are these thoughts? What are the sensations I'm having? And is sometimes asking questions, is what I'm thinking actually true? Is this really, really, but just sometimes just the sheer action of noticing what is going on in my mind, because so much of the day we spend going, I like that. I don't like that. I like that. I don't like that. I like that. I want that. I don't want that. Oh, this is good. This is bad. This is good. This is bad. All day long, and that's actually exhausting. And so, by practicing meditation, because what happens is you can't, you're not sitting on the cushion 24 hours a day, or you're not, meditating while you're running or playing pickleball or playing basketball, 24 hours a day. But it bleeds over into the rest of your life. And so that ability to be more discerning, just becomes the norm. That becomes the way of being. And again, it doesn't fix everything. But it sure has been helpful. I will say that.
I can only agree. I think it's a wonderful practice, and I'm also really happy about that that it's possible to do it while moving. And my question for you, Nita, would be: is it then possible if I'm really good at meditating while moving, could I pretty much be meditating most of the day? Is that possible?
Oh, I think people who
and to be recommended.
Oh yeah. Because you're not going to run into a tree if you're really meditating. You're not going to run into a tree. But I think that to be meditating 24 hours a day, you have to have a very serious practice. And I've been meditating for 30 years, and I'm not meditating 24 hours a day. I definitely have, popping in and out. So it's going to be somebody who's completely devoted their life to it that's going to be at that state, or somebody who's really, really naturally good at it, because there are people that are just naturally good at this state of mind. But the more the greater amount of time during the day that I can be in that state of just equanimity, noticing and equanimity, focus, equanimity. My primary meditation teacher is a man named Shinzen Young. And the phrase that I start out pretty early in Make Every Move meditation is, it's Shinzen's answer to everything, which is infuse your experience with awareness and equanimity. And so anything that arises, you're standing in the grocery line. Yes, I can definitely say that again. Clear my throat. He says, infuse your experience with awareness and equanimity. And what he means is essentially practice all the time. But if you can do that while you're standing in the grocery line, especially if I assume they have the 15 item or less line in Germany. I'm not been, so I don't know. But in the United States here, we have a line where it's, you get to go through faster if you have fewer than 15 items, let's say. And invariably, you'll get behind somebody who has 19 items in the 15 item or less line. And so you're bored and irritated and yeah. Okay. So that's what I thought. I figured it's not a unique thing here. And so what do you do with that? Well, you infuse your experiences, your thoughts about that person, your unpleasant body sensations. That's all experience is. It's thoughts and body sensations with awareness, which is a focus, choosing where in your body to focus and how to do that, whether it's a single focus or a sweeping focus. There's lots of different ways to focus. And equanimity. So that curiosity, that open-mindedness, I'm irritated. What is irritation? Where do I feel it in my body? I'm bored. What is boredom? Where is it? Where is it in my body? What is it doing? What am I thinking? And that's meditation on the fly, on the go. He sometimes calls that mindful micro hits, where you just take a second and just check in with your thoughts and body sensations. Again, with that curiosity, that equanimity. And yeah,
I like the mindful micro hits.
Yeah, isn't that a great phrase? I wish I'd thought of it myself, but it's his. He's the one who thought of that.
I'm gonna use that for sure. But I think that really, what I really like about this whole concept is it breaks, again, like you said before, it busts a myth that you need some room, with some candle burning, and then you sit down and you have some meditative music and so on. But you can be aware pretty much in any situation every day. And also, funny enough, like I realize sometimes I become aware. It could be on an airplane the other day, actually, back from Portugal. And then there was one point where I was a bit bored and it was taking too long and I wasn't sure. And all of a sudden I became aware. And I have this memory. And I think the more awareness and presence you have in your everyday life, you also remember things better. You filter the information better. And I make better decisions, definitely, when I do that more. And it becomes harder and harder because there's so many stimuli distracting us all the time. So that's why I think this is such a great topic and it's so valuable in these times. Anita, before I slowly come to an end, because I promised you I'm not going to take you much more for an hour, I have 3 more questions.
I would stay all day. I'm loving this.
Me too, as you can probably notice, especially also discussing the difference between meditation and flow. I think this is what podcasts
I need to dive.
Great
I
for.
need to dive into that. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking about that.
Yeah, this is also an impulse for me to discuss that more. But also, as humans, we always like these drawers. And like you said before, experience and living is oftentimes not like you can come close, but you can never grasp it fully with our concepts. But one thing, I want to go back to one process as a writer myself. I'm really interested in this meditative writing practice from Natalie Goldberg. Can you describe me how you meditate when writing, or how you combine those two?
Well, she uses the structure of meditation. So it's essentially timed writing. She calls it writing practice. And you set a timer and go. And she prefers writing by hand because it uses a slightly different part of the brain. They've done MRIs on that, and they find that it just lights up a little bit different. It's still in the communication center, but slightly different parts of the brain. And if you say you're going to write for 10 minutes, you continue writing for 10 minutes without crossing out, without worrying about punctuation, grammar, even the lines on the page. And sometimes she will give people a topic so they're not just faced with the blank page. But you go for 10 minutes. And what happens is when we're blocked, it's often that inner critic, that part, I'm going to use my hands here. There's that part of ourself that, wants to write something that's scary or, like I stabbed my mother-in-law or something. I mean, something really awful, okay. Let's just say. I mean, seriously, you want to write that. You want to just write that. And this part of your mind is going, oh my God, no, my God, oh my God. What are they going to think? They're going to think you're a murderer. And then, and so you start writing and this part goes, nope. And you're stuck. And so you end up writing, and this one says, okay, if you write something nice, I'll let you go. And so it goes, okay. And then you write, oh yes, my mother-in-law is wonderful, which she was a nice lady. This is a horrible example. But we had a lovely time and whereas if you keep this hand moving, this part will still continue yelling at you, but it will never catch you. It will never catch this creative part of the brain. And so that works with typing also. And that's the basic idea, is that it's inertia. You get rolling and it'll keep rolling. And when you stop, it'll stay stopped. So, that might be a little bit flowish actually, now that I think about it. Because you get the momentum going. But the structure is like meditation. You intend to write, you choose a time period or an interval, which time period works best with, although actually you could do, I know, there's one writer that talks about writing 3 pages longhand. Nat uses a timer because that's just what she learned from meditation. And then the mind state is that, willingness to keep coming back. So if you get stuck, you repeat the topic, or if you, what I found, which I'm not even sure Natalie said this, is that especially if I'm writing by hand, if I get stuck and don't know what to write next, I just write circles. I just keep writing circles. And eventually, because you're still moving, the hand is still moving and you're not making that crossing out motion, eventually the, idea will rise and another thought will rise. And then, you continue that for the whole time. And ideally you do it with a partner. And then you read aloud to each other with no comment. And that's what the workshops were about. We're reading aloud with no comment so that you learned to listen and notice in your own mind what was happening when you were listening to somebody else. And also when you're reading aloud, notice what's happening in your own mind, what you're saying to yourself. So it's about dealing with the inner critic, bringing it to the surface and writing through it, writing even though it's shouting at you. And that's happens in meditation too, where you sit there and your mind will go, why are you doing this? This is the stupidest thing ever. You could be productive. This is, and so you just keep sitting, even though your mind is doing whatever it's doing. Or my mind wandered again. Oh my gosh. And you bring your mind back and you keep sitting or, moving also. But whatever the practice is that you've done, I know I sometimes when I'm doing, running or walking, and my mind will just be wandering all over the place. I'll think, well, why am I even bothering trying to meditate while I'm moving? Why would I even do that? And then I remember, because it really works. And then I'll just bring my mind back. But it's they call it monkey mind in Buddhism. That's the term, is monkey mind, because it jumps around like that, like a monkey, and just screeching and jumping and screeching and jumping. And so the meditative practice is to learn to write under all circumstances, continue no matter what. And again, it doesn't work for everybody, because some people need that, they need to think before they write, or they need to stop and think while they write to be able to plot a book. Natalie writes primarily nonfiction. And so she's not, dealing with plots, but she is dealing with very deep issues when she writes. So it's not like she's not, doing anything deep, but it's a little different process for some people. And some people can write novels completely with that process, just intuitively. And then they go back and reread and, write again and write again. So that's been the process for me. Those are how I write all of my first drafts, and sometimes second and third drafts. I've written, Depression Hates a Moving Target. I probably wrote that book 4 or 5 times before I actually felt like I had a draft that was worth, really working with because I had so many pieces and parts. And same thing with Make Every Move Meditation, which is a little different book because it's more how-to. But all of those were chunks of writing practices. And then the bigger process was, where do they go? What's the trajectory here so that the reader will be pulled through the book. And if you're an intuitive person, you need to go inside, to figure that out. Whereas if you're a much more, kind of a logical, intellectual, writer, then you might need to step back and think it through. And then you can go and sit down to the page. And so it doesn't, like I said, you have to really find your process. But that's what she did. She'd been a Zen teacher or a Zen practitioner for many, many years. And she was a poet at the time and just had so much trouble. And her teacher, Katagiri Roshi, said, why don't you make writing your practice? And so that's what she did.
Nita, maybe you can help me really quick because I actually just had this idea. I'm trying to write this short story already for a while. And I write my newsletters, I write my blog articles, and usually around self-improvement and health. But this short story is stuck in my mind. But when I write, and this hit really a nerve what you just said, because oftentimes I get this cringe feeling, like we said in German, it's actually an English word, but I feel cringy, like, this is not good enough. What am I even trying to do? And this inner chatter is starting, like, this is not good enough. This is not innovative. This is not creative. Nobody will like that. And then I try to already change. And then at some point I stop. But now, and you said a lot of things here, but now and I already got that I might try the next time to write it by hand. But let's say this starts. So as far as I understand, then I just continue while this voice is there talking to me. And
if you keep your hand moving, I'm sorry, I kind of stepped on you.
Mm-hmm. No.
If you keep your hand moving, the voice will not necessarily go away right away. Eventually it will, because it'll go, oh, he's serious. Well, let me try something else. And then it'll try something else. It'll make you hungry or tired or something else. But, because it is a shapeshifter. The inner critic is a shapeshifter. But yeah, she suggests to set a timer. And so you set that timer. She starts with 10 minutes just because 10 minutes is not, some people need 5. And if you're going to say anything to the voice, say something like, thank you for the information. I'm just going to keep writing until the timer goes off. And so you don't engage with it. Again, it's that kind of equanimity we talked about, where you might be curious about what it's saying, but you probably already know exactly what it's saying. And it's not actually that helpful. But thank you. I hear you. I'm going to keep going. Sometimes I'll even say something like, I know you're trying to help me. And I've got some other ideas. So if you would just give me a little time here, let me finish what I'm doing, and then we'll talk and we'll see how this goes. I actually have a conversation almost like it's a toddler, although that might not work with a toddler. I don't know. But it's some part of you that really does think it's helpful. It's a part that, doesn't want to be criticized, is worried that your work isn't good, whatever. Which actually, who cares? In some ways, we care. We do care. But we write mostly for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like we care, but we don't. We need to care, but not care that much. I had a whole conversation with somebody about that yesterday. It's just hard not to care. And so, but just saying, hey, I hear you. I'm just going to keep going until the timer goes off. And let's see what happens. And then just keep going, because it won't be able to keep up. You'll be writing along or typing. And then yes, to writing by hand. If you're used to typing, I do that when I get stuck. I'll just switch. If I've been writing by hand, I'll start typing. If I've been typing, I'll write by hand. Again, it just activates a little slightly different part of the brain. And sometimes that shift will help. Sometimes going to a different room, going to a coffee house, something like that will actually help. But often it's just the matter of persisting in the face of this thing that thinks it's being helpful. And it hasn't progressed past the caveman days, actually. So it still thinks you're being chased by a lion when you're not at all.
Nita, this has been really helpful. I'm going to try that for sure. And give you credit then if I eventually will finish my short story.
Yeah, good luck with it. I'm very curious.
I will definitely let you know. By the way, it's also a tangent question, but I was looking for your poem that won an award called Memoir.
Oh, yeah, it's never been published. Memorial, yeah, it's never been published, except in an old newspaper, an old newspaper, and it's about my father and I going to the Memorial Tournament in Dublin, Ohio. It's a golf tournament, and yeah, it's a sort of a long, rambling poem, and I've got it. I have it somewhere,
get it
but
published.
it hasn't been. Yeah, I could try. Yeah, I could try now. It was published in the newspaper when it won the award. It was published in the local newspaper, but that's a good idea. I haven't gone back to the public. I haven't gone back to poetry very much. Although I have written a few poems. A friend of mine died recently, and when she was ill, she was ill for a short time, and I wrote a poem for her. But I don't think of myself as a poet, but aren't we all poets?
Well, maybe there will be a Nita Sweeney poem collection coming out at some point.
You just never know, really. Watch this space, because you just never know what's coming out of here.
Nita, two more questions, actually. One is that I would like to ask you, is there something, and it's a bit of going away from what we've talked about now, but is there something that you believe to be true in the past and that you have come to realize you don't believe anymore? Something you held to be true, and that over the years and with your plenty of life experience in different fields have come to realize it's actually not so important.
That's a deep question. The first thought was that people can't change, that I used to think people couldn't change, that they were sort of set in stone. And now I realize that there are some people that won't change a lot, but that we're always changing, and everything's always changing. So that's probably one. The other thing I think is, though, that I kind of joked about this before, about liking the pieces of paper that you could put in frames, the certificates suitable for framing. And those are, while still important, less and less important. And that could just be a product of aging, and because I have some certificates now. But I think the perspective of realizing that the process is so important. I just was so goal-oriented for so many years, and still can be, but really leaning into the process, whether it's the process of writing, relationships, movement, meditation, any of that's really where the joy is. And so if I can get myself there and help other people get there, that has changed, because I definitely was let's get the gold star. And I still like gold stars. I always will. But it's not the same. I don't have the same ferocity or the drive about that stuff. I have plenty of drive, but it's much more about the work than it is the end result now. So that's probably the biggest change.
Thank you for that.
Great question. Holy cow.
That's actually one, that I recently heard myself. And I thought it's such a great question, especially with your experience. I'm really happy for having asked it. All right, Nita, one last thing. So now you can address all the readers in Germany of your book. What is something that you would wish them that your book, Make Every Move a Meditation, does for them?
Oh, help them find peace of mind. Help them to realize that they can have peace of mind in any moment. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to do anything special. They can find a deep inner peace by practicing. That's my mission, if I have one. That would be it.
Great. And I actually have a challenge for everyone listening right now, is that I know many people that always tell me, I'm not a meditator. I don't do that. I don't sit down quietly. It's not for me. It's esoteric, blah, blah. And I made it now my mission that I'm going to find someone and buy your book, Nita, and give that to that person in order to bust the myth. And so my challenge to everyone out there is, if you have someone, maybe you think of someone right now who is not a meditator, according to their own words, give them Nita's book. Bust a myth. Make them into meditators and show them that they can be more than what they are right now. Then they can find more peace, more awareness. And like you said before I wrote that down, make experience, infuse the living experience, I add that living, with awareness and equanimity. So I think that would be a great thing if we can spread your message further in this country.
I love it. You're making me cry, Max. I got tears. Give me tears. I love it. It's good. Those are good tears. Yeah.
Nita, yeah, it has been really a pleasure. I really enjoy. This is what I enjoy most about my work, is just like taking the time, getting to know someone like you, and talking to you without really a time clock. And thank you so much for your being and for your work and for your inspiration.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you do. You're bringing excellent things into the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And also thank you to the listeners. We are off now. You find the links to Nita's book and everything, also to your website, in the show notes, either underneath the video or in the show notes of the podcast, wherever you're hearing this, or on flowgrade.de. Thank you very much. And I'll hear you and see you next time. Go for Flow. So, das war's mit dieser Folge der Flowgrade Show. Vielen Dank, dass du wieder eingeschaltet hast. Ich hoffe, du hast wieder was gelernt. Und wenn dir die Flowgrade Show gefällt, dann freue ich mich natürlich über eine 5-Sterne-Bewertung auf Apple Podcasts oder auf Spotify. Teile auch gerne diese Folge oder andere Folgen mit deinen Freunden, mit deiner Familie. Es hilft uns, andere Leute zu erreichen, den Tribe größer zu machen. Denn das ist mein Ziel, eine Community an lebensbejahenden, positiven Menschen zu kreieren, die darauf aus sind, ihr Leben und ihre Unternehmungen mit mehr Flow zu füllen. Die Shownotes zu der Episode findest du wie gehabt auf flowgrade.de oder auch im Flow Tribe. Und hier der Appell, melde dich gerne an im Flow Tribe, werde Teil unserer Community. Es ist wirklich eine tolle Community, wirklich viele, viele geniale Menschen, die bereits zu uns gefunden haben. Du kannst dich kostenfrei anmelden und reinschnuppern über ein Basiskonto, und das findest du mit allen weiteren Informationen auf flowtribe.community. Ich wiederhole, flowtribe.community. Dort gibt es weitere Informationen und du kannst dich einfach anmelden. So, das war's mit dieser Folge. Und auch noch der letzte Hinweis: Wenn dir die Episode gefallen hat, dann hol dir auch gerne das Buch von der Nita. Es gibt es ab 24. Mai im deutschen Buchhandel. Verschenke es gerne an Leute, die vielleicht sich schwer tun mit der Meditation und diese aber eben über das Buch dann einbauen können in ihre Jogging-Routine oder in ihre Fitnessroutine etc. Also deswegen hol dir das Buch Make Every Move a Meditation. Ich freue mich immer, so tolle Sachen dann meiner Gäste auch zu präsentieren. So, das war's für diese Folge. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Ich bin Max Gotzler. Go for Flow.